welcome to Whatever It Takes. And thank you for coming along this journey with me. My name is Dustin, and this podcast is proof that I'll never grow up. We're going to be exploring the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but in a different way. We're going to be looking at it in a chronological order. And this journey actually mirrors a journey that I'm having with my family right now, and more specifically, my son, Grant. My son, Grant, and I love movies. Before the pandemic, we probably went to a movie theater once a week. Any new thing that came out, anything that we could get our hands on, we went. And many times, we even made it a family affair, bringing my wife along. And she begrudgingly came along at first, but started to love the little nerdiness that not only Grant and I shared at these comic book movies, but she started to like them too, I think. But that love of movies started to go into a little bit of a exploration phase for Grant. At one point, we even started a podcast ourselves. The Movie Inspectors were born, a little makeshift setup, and we were reviewing all of the Marvel Cinematic movies, any of the little nerdy stuff that would come out. And we enjoyed ourselves a great deal. We still do. Even during the pandemic. But the Movie Inspectors was something that Grant eventually grew out of. He didn't want to do it anymore. Not in that way. We still watch things all the time, and he has an amazing mind, and something that is just something I'm so proud of is our relationship at the movies. And in fact, even now, post-pandemic, we're starting to go to the movies again. But that does kind of lead us to this little desert that we've been in for entertainment during the pandemic. And the start of this podcast in March of 2021, 1 year into the pandemic, we started to realize that the world was not going to get back together soon. In fact, we had realized it for a while, but for that first year, we were so busy worrying about work and how we were just going to survive. We didn't really miss the entertainment that we had before the pandemic as much. But a year into it, we kind of started to realize that nothing is going back to normal. And it wasn't going back to normal anytime soon. So I had this idea. I was looking for some comfort for our family, but also something that we both loved, and both my son Grant and I, and some new stuff. I realized that although we had explored the Marvel Cinematic Universe in our reviews that we did it with the Movie Inspectors, we didn't really go watch them in a chronological order, in the not just the order in which they were released, but in order in which it was produced, where the main storyline fit into the Marvel world. One of the things that we loved about the Marvel world was how interconnected it is. So I came across this list on Digital Spy of the Marvel movies in chronological order, but it also put in there all the TV shows. These are things that, to be quite honest, we just didn't have time in a pre-pandemic world to watch all of them. But now that we're spending more time at home, I thought it would be great to actually start watching this universe unfold as it was intended by the story writers in the chronological order, starting with Captain America, the first Avenger, and moving on through. Although I think in the future we might see something that goes beyond that 1940s movie. And so my family and I started watching these things in order, including Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., including a lot of the other properties that were on this list. And we watched a lot of new stuff we hadn't watched before, stuff I hadn't watched in years. And I marveled at, no pun intended, the interconnectivity of it all. We had big movies with studios, as well as TV shows produced by mainstream production companies with ABC and Disney, and then of course the Netflix shows and other smaller shows. And yet, even though they were never absolutely overwhelming with their connectivity, I found that watching it in chronological order, that we were able to see how the writers connected the world. Sometimes it was ham-handed, sometimes it was subtle. And that in that idea, this podcast was born, because I wanted to explore this in a more intimate way, and a way that will allow us to explore those intimacies, those interconnections that these different properties are bringing to bear. And also kind of explore how both me and my son bonded during this time period as well, and how it really kind of made us sane, having this universe unfold in a way it does. But of course, we're not just talking about the old stuff. When it comes to Marvel, they're still having even more content than ever. Now that a year later, the world is starting to open up again, and we're seeing all this content coming to Disney Plus and the movies. So this podcast is going to talk mostly about the chronological order of the Marvel productions, but it's also going to touch about what's new in Marvel as well. So here is what I envision for this podcast. We're going to start each week with What Up 616. We're going to find out what's happening currently in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're going to recap all the news that has happened in Marvel, all the things that are coming out, any of the current stuff that's coming out, we're going to touch on here in this little segment. It's not going to get into spoilers, and we're not going to do full reviews. Other podcasts and websites are going to do that for us and do it much better. But I envision that this will be something that we touch on of current stuff that is coming out, and trailers and movie news, getting ready for the big Marvel events that are happening over the next few years. We'll then go into the recap. This will be a hopefully 60-second recap of everything that is happening in the episodes that we are going to be reviewing that day. So whether it's a movie or several different TV episodes, it's going to be a 60-second recap, going over the plot. Again, I'm assuming that most of you will have known about this property. I'm not going to worry too much about spoilers here. We will be spoiling the plot, but we want to get a little bit of a recap of what is happening in the episode that we're about to talk about. Then we get into the meat of the episode. We're going to be talking about how we were building the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're going to talk about how this project weaves the rich tapestry of the MCU, connections that it has, or layers that it builds, building for the future of Marvel or connecting to the past of Marvel in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then we'll end each episode with a look at the watch list. This is a list that I've compared and compiled from different lists throughout the web, but a lot of it on the Digital Spy list that originally started us on this journey of all the Marvel properties and how they fit in a Marvel cinematic universe and in the chronological timeline that we'll be reviewing them in on this podcast. And a note on the watch list, I'm taking great liberties of what is a Marvel Cinematic Universe property and what is not, because it's my podcast. I can do that, damn it. But mostly it's because I consider a property that was produced after 2008's Marvel's Iron Man by Marvel or Disney as part of this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then I also have thrown in there the Sonyverse, the Sony villainverse that is now connecting to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a weird multi-dimensional way. And yes, that does include the three Spider-Man movies that, Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. Those are also considered part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But that also led to including the original Spider-Man movies into this little chronological timeline. That's the Tobey Maguire Amazing Spider-Mans and the Andrew Garfield's, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans and the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Mans. I put those into this list as well. So yes, there are going to be some TV shows in the list that some may not consider canon, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Runaways or Cloak and Dagger. But they could be canon if you consider it in a multiverse fashion. They definitely were canon at the time that they were conceived and produced. So I'm including them as part of this Marvel Cinematic Universe, this amazing piece of entertainment that has spanned over a decade and hundreds of different episodes of television and over 20, 25 movies now. And I think there's a way to weave them together and tell a story of an interconnected universe, whether it's through a multiverse or through direct connections or forgotten connections. And of course, yes, the Netflix universe is in there as well. At the time of this recording, we don't know what the status is of some of these things, but I believe that we can find a way to connect them anyways in our discussions. And whether it's considered canon now or considered canon back then, it's still fun to look at all these connections that were created and layered into this universe. So I hope you forgive the list a little bit if you don't like it. Follow along, and maybe this might be something that is fun for all of us. If you'd like to follow along in our journey, you can come along at whateverittakespod.com with hyphens in between whateverittakespod.com. Whatever, hyphen, it, hyphen, takes, hyphen, pod.com. Maybe we'll have a better website name. We're waiting for a few website names to free up, but that's where it is right now. And you can follow along in our journey, see where we are in our watch list as a family, but also get any episodes of this podcast that might be dropping to the various YouTube, Spotify, and video feeds. I can't wait for next week's episode. The actual episode 1, Captain America: First Avenger. And we will see you then. Bye-bye.